Hey everybody, how you doing? Today we were going to restyle a Neea buxifolia. This is a very old tree. It was originally owned by a member in the Orlando Bonsai Society. He moved up north and sold it to a friend of mine who years ago sold it to me. And we worked it and did a little bit to it here and there. And then the owner who had it, he never really wired it after it was initially reworked and styled. Basically, he just trimmed it out, and you see what happens. You get these nice clouds, but it starts looking like a balloon. This tree is a decent sized tree to where you could put some good refinement on these pads. It does have a rounded top started. It's a tropical, so tropical trees obviously should have a rounded crown. Most mature trees all should have rounded crowns. And it's starting to develop that rounded crown. However, you have these big, giant, singular pads. And this tree, in order to be a more refined looking tree, needs to be detail wired. And these pads need to be divided into 3, 4, 5, 7 pads to make it look more in detail to a full-size tree. You want to have refinement and interest in this, not these big giant balloons. So today what I'm going to do is, this has been in this pot for a few years. It's very well potted. This is an old Tokonami pot. It's a chop pot, about 45 years old, from one of the old members. That was I got that a few years back. What I'm going to do is, this tree, Neea buxifolia, grows flute straight trunks. They don't typically have taper. This was originally a collected tree from Puerto Rico, and they don't have any movement or taper naturally. They usually have these long trees. So what we would do is we'll cut them and grow them and cut them and grow them and develop that. Well, this was done a little bit different. This was actually done with a saw to create some movement and some interest in this straight trunk years ago, and divided into four sub trunks. As you can see, this is all one trunk, and it was sawed. But because of that, all this inside is dead wood that needs to be periodically treated, just so it doesn't rot away completely. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brass brush. I'm going to clean up some of the bark on it. Take any of the algae or the mold that's on the base of the bark, just to kind of clean it up. And also, you start getting the algae that's going to grow along the trunk. If you have any rough bark, this isn't rough bark, but if you have any rough bark types trees, it tends to rot it. So I don't like to let any moss grow on my trunk, so I clean them up with a brush. But also I'll brush the dead wood, which will take any weak dead or pithy or rotted wood, and show off the texture a little better, and get rid of it, so we only have that dense dead wood left. And then we'll hit it with a little bit of water, and then we'll use some lime sulfur, diluted down to about 1/4 of a strength with water, and put that on. The reason why I dilute it is this is a tropical. It's not a northern hardy tree that grows up high in the mountains to where it would be bleached bright white. It would be more of a gray look, kind of like this right now. The only reason why I'm putting the lime sulfur on is just so it doesn't rot away. I don't really want to have a giant contrast between the dead wood and the live wood, but I do want a contrast. I want to be able to show that. So I'm just going to work on brushing this, and then I'm going to treat it. It'll have an orangish yellow look to it for the next couple of days until it turns like a gray, and it'll be good for another 6 months to a year. But let me just clean that up, and then we'll talk about trimming these branches, and I'll do one just to kind of show you, and then I'll do the whole thing, and then we'll get to talking about wiring. Okay? See you in a minute. Okay, so I cleaned up the dead wood and I treated it with lime sulfur. You kind of see how it has a little brighter gray appearance. It's not bleached white appearance, but it's a grayer appearance, and it has a nice contrast between the live bark and the dead inner wood. The next thing I'm going to do is actually start setting the structure of this branch. Typically branches always fork off into twos, okay, on a regular tree. If you do a quick look up on the branches, you can see but they generally will fork off into 2s. Every once in a while you'll see it fork off into 3s, but it doesn't last. As it continues to grow, it gets too cluttered and it shades itself out, and one of the 2 dies, withers and dies and falls off. But when you're in bonsai, when you're completely trimming it over and over and over again, and you're redistributing that auxin hormone in the branching, it's backbudding everywhere. It's not backbudding into 2s, it's backbudding into 4s and 5s. Well, if you left that way, what's going to happen is not only is this going to get solid, dense network of foliage, it's going to continue to balloon out like this, so no light can get inside, and you can't get any backbudding. But also what happens is when you have the 4 and 5 branches all coming from one location, you get something called reverse taper in the branching, because all of that energy is going down the branch and going at one location where you have 5 or 6 branches all coming from one spot. And as they continue to thicken, it'll get like a big warty appearance, and it's just not natural. It doesn't look like a regular tree, and it's not good for the structure. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to set it to 2s. We're going to cut out a lot of excessive branching. Also, it makes it easier to wire, makes it easier to arrange, and it makes it more naturalistic. I typically start at the bottom and work my way up. Looking at the structure on this tree, you can also see how full and heavy this is. It's actually shading this out. Opening this up will also help eliminate that, because we'll get more sunlight to go down and hit this lower branch that's been weakened by this not correctly being thinned over the years. So I'm going to start over here on this little branch here. Looking at the structure of the tree, this isn't the first branch, it's actually a secondary branch, but for the design, it's taking the place of the first branch. This is going to be the first branch of the tree. So we're going to come in here, and anywhere where you have 4 or 5 branches all coming from one location, we're going to cut those to 2 and start cutting the structure. Now, I don't want to cut this bare to a stump. I am going to leave branches to wire and shape. However, this is going to be opened up quite a bit. It's going to be set back to an earlier design phase because it wasn't wired and trimmed correctly from the get-go. Now what I may end up doing on some locations is, instead of cutting all of the branches off, if it's like 5 or 6, maybe cutting it to 3 with the intention of waiting for the 2 that I want to keep to thicken up and become more believable, and then eliminating the 3rd one, doing it in stages. I don't want to cut this down to where it just has the bare bones. I want to have some foliage on the tips here, so when I'm done, it'll still look like a nice tree, although in my head I have different things that I'm going to do next year and the year after that to make the structure more complete, but without setting the tree back aesthetically a couple of years. Okay? I'll show you what how I trim it in just a sec. Thank you. Okay, just to show you, if you look closely at these branches, they're set to structure. They're cut to 2s. There may be a couple little sprouts that were left because I want to have these grow out to become side branches. As we work our way out, we have more and more movement, we have more and more twigginess. That's what we want. Once we arrange these into individual pads, we'll be able to make these arranged as nice dense subpads. There was areas here, which you can see now, if you come close, where there was 5, 6, 7 branches all coming from one location. I cut a lot of those down to 2. There's also a lot of nubs from years of not going back and trimming the stubs. So we went and cut the stubs. Here's a little stub right here that I kind of left to show you. You see this little stub here? We cut it down to at a slight concave cut. We'll use a little bit of Lysol put on it, and then we use some Keenol to seal the cut so it'll roll over properly. All these will be treated with Keenol before we start wiring. I'm going to continue. I did this branch and I did this back branch here. I'm going to continue on up the tree and continue to thin it out like this. When it's all thinned out and we set the structure, then I'll go back and I'll wire this from top to bottom and arrange the branches. I'm going to show you what it looks like with a few more branches cut, and then I'll show you what it looks like completely trimmed, and then I'll start wiring. Okay? Okay, thanks. Okay, so we thinned out a few of the tops. We talked about how heavy this one was and how it was shading this area. You can see once it was thinned out and brought in, it's still probably going to be trimmed out a little bit, but we're going to subdivide this into different pads and it'll let a lot more sunlight in here, because if this was left to its own devices, even with repeated trimming, stuff like this would never do anything. It would be way too shaded. It would end up withering and dying. The whole branch just would continue to get weak. Because this was so full, the branch was thickening up. So we needed to thin this out and bring it back to get it back into control so we can come in here. The next thing I'm going to do is the top. You can see the difference between what hasn't been done and what has been done. But we're going to thin this top out, but we're also going to divide this top into many individual pads as well. So a lot of this will be brought down and subdivided. Any of the shoots that were coming straight up that were just filling up the canopy, we took off. We have not set this for structure yet, but that's what we're going to do in just a minute. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Okay, so we have it all trimmed out from top to bottom. A couple things I wanted to go over with you real quick, just to kind of show why we did it. Whenever you have a weak area, like this was weak, we typically leave more foliage on there. This was also shaded out with these heavier tops, so we left a little bit more foliage on there. Also, we thinned out the top pretty hard because these are apically dominant. They are a small tree, large shrub, a small tree in Puerto Rico, so they have a strong apical dominance. So we thinned out the top, and then we'll work and wire a lot of these in to give you that nice rounded appearance with separate pads, because this is going to grow pretty quick. It's going to fill in very quickly, and this big hole you see here now will fill in with branching. But we're going to work it and wire it and shape it. I'm going to do a couple branches and I'll show you what they look like in a second. Okay, thanks. Okay, I did a basic wiring, and I usually don't do the shaping, but I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what I was talking about, is subdividing these pads into different elements. As they fill in, we'll have these little fuller sub pads, but what this will do is not only give this a lot more detail work, and it'll look better up close, but it'll also let the light shine through to keep areas like this strong and back budding. We're going to have to come in here and rub off sections that we're not going to want branching constantly, because this is going to back bud like crazy the way we have it opened up and having the sunlight in here. And these are not completely arranged yet. I'm working on it, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. Normally I don't finish arrange everything until it's wired from top to bottom. And the only spot I wired was here because it's 5 o'clock and I can't get, this is going to be a multi-day job. This right here was about, what, an hour and a half wiring? Hour and a half, 2 hours. It's probably going to be about 4 hours completely to wire it, and then another half hour, 45 minutes to shape it. And then what I'm going to do is I'll show you how to repot this. It's simple repotting. We already did a repotting video, but I'm just going to go over it. And I want to just talk a little bit about cleaning and prepping, as if though you were going to show this tree and how to amend the surface, but we'll go over that a little bit later. This is going to be part 1 of the Neea buxifolia video. Thank you for watching. We'll have the second part up very soon. Thanks.